They don't vanish in the dark, they vanish in paperwork. Every disappearance begins the same way: a knock, a clipboard, and a decision made long before anyone answers the door. Across Illinois, Missouri, and Florida, thousands of children have entered a system that calls itself protective, yet functions like an industry. Each case, each removal, each adoption, a transaction justified as child safety, subsidized by the federal government. The more children placed, the more funding secured. The formula is clean. The outcome is not. A call comes in, a teacher, a neighbor, a mandatory reporter. Within hours, the report becomes a coded intake. Neglect risk 02A, substance exposure, domestic violence presence. Each label triggers a reimbursement stream under Title 4E. Within the bureaucracy, protective custody translates to federal match. Courtrooms echo with the same pattern. Overworked defenders, caseworkers reading scripted statements, judges leaning on agency reports that were never verified. The removal of a child isn't an emergency anymore. It's a process. And lately, the faces being removed have changed. Once confined to poverty and urban centers, removals now rise fastest in suburban and rural counties, the places where federal funding once flowed the least. White and mixed-race families are entering the system in record numbers. Between 2012 and 2022, the share of white children losing parental rights climbed from roughly 40% to nearly 60%. Each year, that percentage inches upward, a quiet shift in who the system consumes. Behind every child's file lies a contract. Illinois calls them purchase of service agreements. Florida calls them community-based care grants. Missouri files them as family preservation programs. The names differ. The money flows the same. Title 4E dollars leave Washington, filter through state treasuries, and end up in private nonprofits like One Hope United, ChildNet, and Aunt Martha's. These agencies act as both caretakers and contractors, billing the government for services rendered: therapy hours, supervised visits, transportation, case management. But the audits show something else: duplicated entries, copy-pasted progress notes, falsified attendance logs. In 2025, Illinois DCFS terminated contract 040198053 with One Hope United mid-case, citing contractual and administrative realignment. 31 other cases were under concurrent audit. Yet within months, the same leadership surfaced in Florida and Missouri, attached to new grants and familiar oversight boards. The paper trail looks like movement, but it's continuity. The same directors, auditors, and licensing officers cycling through agencies that investigate, regulate, and profit from each other. It's a feedback loop disguised as reform. In 2022, Illinois passed the Bias-Free Child Removal Pilot Program Act. It promised fairness, to remove demographic information from case reviews so race, gender, or income wouldn't sway decisions. 3 counties were chosen: DuPage, Champaign, and Williamson. On paper, the idea was noble. In practice, it moved removals into wealthier suburbs. When identifiers were hidden, reviewers defaulted to paperwork, not people. Families who looked stable were presumed able to recover without state help. Families who appeared organized but emotionally strained, often middle class, often white, were deemed deceptive, at risk of hidden harm. Between 2019 and 2022, white adoption finalizations rose from 52% to 58%. Black adoptions declined. Hispanic removals stayed nearly flat. The bias didn't vanish. It migrated. It stopped being about color and started being about compliance. Who questions authority? Who has time to fight? Who signs whatever form the state slides across the table? The children who don't get adopted, the ones with trauma or age or illness, end up in group homes renamed therapeutic centers. These are the new orphanages: Centralia, Lake Villa, Salem, buildings built for silence, quiet rooms where children are restrained for de-escalation, logs rewritten after inspections, Contracts renewed despite repeated abuse reports. In Illinois, only 15% of children reach permanency within 12 months, less than half the national average. The rest drift through temporary guardianships, psychiatric holds, or adoption pipelines that fail before finalization. Every delay generates another billable month of care. When the goal is closure, reunification becomes an obstacle. The system earns more from prolonging pain than resolving it. The faces behind the paperwork are polished and credentialed. Executives trade roles between nonprofits and government boards. One year they run the agency. The next, they oversee its funding. Mark Smith, former DCFS director, spent years linked to Aunt Martha's, a major state vendor. Damon Cates, seated on the Illinois Youth Commission, advises both the governor's office and philanthropic partners that fund private child welfare pilots. Governor Pritzker's education and welfare initiatives intersect with these same networks, blurring state oversight with private influence. Even the national nonprofits, Thrive, Casey Family Programs, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, orbit the same directors who once ran One Hope United. This is how oversight dissolves. Regulators and contractors sharing conference tables, audits written by those who profit from the outcomes they grade. Performance-based contracts reward numbers, not families. Each successful adoption, each permanency achieved, becomes a data point on a funding graph, and a child's life recast as a success story that no one checks twice. In America's child welfare system, failure has been industrialized. From 19th century orphanages to today's privatized networks, the language has evolved, but the incentives have not. Every decade promises reform. Every decade builds a more efficient version of the same machine. The system no longer needs to steal children in secret. It simply redefines the act as protection. Across counties, across races, across class lines, families are consumed, not by neglect, but by bureaucracy. Bias-free became profit-driven. Protection became production. And the children, they became collateral. This is not the end of the story. This is where it begins again, until someone dismantles the architecture.